Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we are going to dig into something that I have struggled with, and it's one of those things that we all have our preferences. We all have our like pet projects that we love working with, and today we're going to challenge me to use one that I have historically not loved, but I'll tell you what I do love is our guest who's going to be teaching us. I've been following her career for a long time, and I'm so excited to finally have her on the show. Please welcome Bree Hall. Bree, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm super excited to have you here. Like I said, I've been following you for a long time. I'm glad that we were finally able to line something up. But for folks who haven't seen your work before, can you give us a bit of a background on who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So you may have seen me on the interwebs as Bites of Free. I've been a front end engineer for about five, I think actually 6 years now. I keep saying five. I don't know why. But my career started out as a full stack engineer in 2018. I very quickly realized I did not like back end development at all. And I felt like the front end is where I could be a lot more creative. And I felt like there was just like an endless world for me to explore. So I really ended up diving into that. And in doing so, and in learning about myself and in learning about coding and how I learn best, I started to share what my journey was like on social media because I didn't see a lot of people that I could relate to at the time who maybe had struggled in getting a career in software engineering or getting a career in coding. And I guess my presence on the internet is mostly to show people that there isn't one right way to do it. Sometimes there's going to be ups, sometimes there's going to be downs. You don't necessarily have to have the most formal traditional education, but if you have a will, there's definitely a way for you to get there.
I love that, and it echoes a lot of my feelings on the subject. Where there are a lot of paths in, there are a lot of paths through, and it's not about a destination; it's about finding a way that fits, right? And so
Absolutely.
I really do love that. Um, okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we actually want to cover today.
Yeah.
Um, I am very interested in just finding ways to make building and scaling things on the front end a little more sustainable because I am definitely, I love my bespoke handcrafted CSS. It is my, we'll call it my Achilles heel. If I get my hands into a CSS file, I'm going to stay there all day. And so for me, what I find is that I really enjoy writing CSS when I start. I really enjoy getting into the design of something, making it work the way that I want. But over time, the bespokeness of what I'm doing starts to make it difficult to onboard maintainers. It makes it hard for me to remember what I was doing when I worked on the thing. And I've found ways, so the way that I've contained that is I've started reaching for the scoped single file components where
Mhm.
there's, like Astro is my current preferred way of doing this. I've got a little bit of markup, got a little bit of CSS, and they're very tightly coupled so that I don't have to remember that this section of the global CSS file relates to this tiny little file over here. But even with that, I think there's still some rough edges and some things that I would like to do better. So this is where you're an expert, and this is where I'd love to pick your brain a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about how do you make consistent things in front end projects that can survive maintenance, that can survive age.
Absolutely. I think the first piece of creating something that is consistent, but also still malleable and flexible is
Mm-hmm.
not going into something with the mindset that whenever you create it at a certain day or a certain time, that is how it's always going to be and that's how it's going to stand. So I think a lot of times I start something just like you. I'm very excited. I'm really into the styling. I want things to look a certain way. I sort of have an idea of what it is. But for me, once I like start to get into it and then I start to see some of the components together, because I will be the first person to say, I do not scope everything out in Figma. I do not like do a lot of designing personally. I find that if I try to do it, I'm not going to do the development at all. So sometimes I tend to just like dive in. But for me, it's usually having an open mind of, okay, I kind of know how I want this to look in my head, working it out, seeing how different pieces work together. And then if I don't like it, it's easier for me to change a component that's being reused multiple times versus going into individual places, almost like you said in Astro with like the templates and having to change it in multiple different places. That's usually how I tend to go about it.
Got it. Okay, great. So, I mean, that sounds, in the abstract, that all makes a lot of sense. So when we get down to brass tacks, what tools are you specifically reaching for to make that possible?
Typically, I am an Astro girly. Like, we're going to be working with Next.js today, but I love Astro. Astro and templates just makes development so much easier. In Tailwind, I also have been recently using, I previously didn't use Tailwind because I was not happy about the super long class names. I really didn't like the thought of, oh, I can just like do this with CSS if I have my own CSS file. Like, that's really easy. Why would I use this over that? But what ended up happening was I realized as I started to use some of the utilities, it was a lot easier as I got to know them more and got to realize what kind of like flexibility and scalability almost Tailwind has, because some properties have multiple different CSS properties involved. And it kind of takes away the, I'm not a designer, I don't know if this has the right spacing. Let's go with what a designer who that's their whole job is suggesting.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense. I'm with you. Because I will agree. I'm coming from the same standpoint of like a lot of things about Tailwind kind of put me off, right? And so I have not made the switch, and so I'm really excited to see sort of how you've bridged that gap from somebody who didn't like the way that it was set up to somebody who's using it. So I guess were there specific things that you did that made Tailwind make sense for you? Was it more of a like through prolonged usage, it started to feel more familiar and that sort of just got rid of the hesitation? Or like how did you shape Tailwind into something that you wanted to use and reach for as a default?
Yeah, absolutely. So I previously, before becoming a developer advocate, I worked on a design system. And working on a design system, number one, easily one of the most difficult jobs that I've had, being like a maintainer on a really robust component library, but it taught me a lot. And it taught me a lot about having good project structure, good standards, and good ways of scoping and creating things so that they do end up scaling with the project. And one time I tweeted out like, oh, Tailwind, really long class names, I don't really love it. And one of my coworkers actually saw it and was like, well, actually, I use Tailwind as a way to leverage creating my own component library or design system when they were creating projects. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And we thought about it in the realm of a component library where there's a lot of props, a lot of state, a lot of things going on. And I knew that my projects were not at that scale. And I don't know if I will ever need a component library at that scale. But what it did do was it allowed me to mold and take out the little pieces of Tailwind that I wanted to use and not have to like create on my own, and shape them in a way or componentize them in one nice package where, okay, I want to create a heading, for instance, which is one of the things that we're going to create today. I don't need to create that 20 different times on my page if I'm doing like a blog or I have a template for something. Just being able to create one, use the exact properties that I need from Tailwind, and then just exporting that and not having to worry about it again sort of reframed how I was thinking about it. Going from thinking about it as we're putting the class names directly on every single element that we need to be styled to I'm creating a small package of just one thing that I'm trying to achieve kind of helped me reframe.
Yeah. And we'll probably, as we get into the code, I'll have a couple more pointed questions about this, because there's some things that always come to me when we're basically inlining the styles via class names.
Yeah.
I always worry about like, okay, but what happens when we decide that we're going to change the border radius? Do I just have to globally find and replace the border radius class in every class that's using it? And like, I'm like, but then I'm kind of like, well, okay, but why aren't we just? Anyways, lots of things that come to my mind that I'm like, what? But I'm going to make it harder. So I'm very excited to dig into this a little bit and learn more. So let's see. What else do we need to know? So we're going to be using, you said Next.js today. We're going to be using Tailwind. How are you organizing these systems? Like, what are you using to sort of keep track of it all and make sure that other people know how to use it?
Absolutely. So one tool is Storybook, and it's really great for a lot of things, especially visual testing. But we're going to be using that today to visually see exactly what we're building in isolation. What we're going to be doing is building the components in isolation from pages just so we can see what the building process is like for them. Originally, I was thinking about building something, but I think it kind of takes away from the understanding of we're building a component that can live by itself regardless of what page it's on or how it's being used. So by developing in isolation that way, that's what we're going to end up doing. But yeah, usually Storybook. I also use a package called class names, very popular. Nothing crazy. It's basically just a tool that concats class names for you, and it allows you to conditionally render different classes.
Cool. Very, very cool. All right. Well, so I don't think I have any other questions that wouldn't be easier to answer with code. So why don't we switch over into the pair programming view? I'm going to pop up this banner and this banner here. And first and foremost, I'm going to make a shout out to our captioner. We've got Vanessa here with us doing live human captioning today. Thank you very much, Vanessa. That is White Coat Captioning, and that's made possible through the support of Netlify, who covers the cost of that. Also today, we're going to be using Tuple for the pair programming. You'll see a little bit about how that works as Bree and I go through the project today. But if you ever work with other people, it's dope. You should try it. We're talking to Bree. You should go and follow Bree on all the places. Let me drop a little link in here. This is where you can find Bree all over the internet. I love a link tree. And then we, let's see, we're talking about Storybook. We're talking about, what else are we talking about today? We're talking about Tailwind.
We are.
Tailwind CSS. Let's get into this one. And any other links that I should throw up here at the beginning before we dump in, or should we, we'll just put them up as we go?
I think we might put them up as we go. I think those are good ones for now.
Excellent. All right, then I think the next piece is to ask you what I do next.
Yeah. So feel free to open your favorite code editor, and we are actually going to spin up a new Next.js project.
All right, I'm in a code editor.
Perfect.
I will move into, let's see, let's go into this one and this one, and I'm ready.
Perfect. Is it okay if I paste in a little command?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Oh, perfect.
Okay.
Yep. So we're going to do npx create next app, and you can go ahead and hit enter. And what this is going to do is create our next application. Like I said, I really like Astro, but Astro doesn't work super, super well with Storybook just yet. So we are going to do TypeScript. We are going to do ESLint. We do want CS or Tailwinds, and we are going to do a source directory.
Okay. Do you want to use App Router or not?
We can. It actually doesn't matter too much because we are not really using the Next.js project.
Okay,
we are just using it as a vessel. And no, we don't want to do any customizations to the aliases.
I'm really glad that's what you said because I hit the button before I asked.
It's all good. Yeah, so that's going to install everything that we need. And that's so lovely that it just does it all for you in one go.
Really nice. Let's see. This put us in Tailwind components.
Yes.
And then I will open that.
Perfect. And the next thing we're going to do, I've had a couple of issues with this before, so I just want to open the tailwind.config.ts file.
Okay,
let me
init this project so that it stops being grayed out on us.
Okay, perfect.
Wait, where am I? Why isn't that hold on one second. Let me reload the window. And now it's not grayed out. All right, so we're in the Tailwind config.
Awesome. We love it. So the thing that I'm looking for is to make sure in our content array that source and components is included. And this is because we want Tailwind to be able to find classes and to use classes in our source components folder.
Got it. Okay, great.
Awesome. And it looks good. The next thing we're going to do is install class names. And that's a really easy npm install class. Yep, exactly.
All right.
And the last thing that we're going to need to install is Storybook. And that's going to be npx space sb space init.
All right.
And we do want to install it. And it is going to turn our server on immediately as soon as it is installed, which is
okay. So this is adding Storybook 835, installing dependencies.
Yes.
That's all good. And now it is, oh, it determined that it was a next app. And so it's auto-installing things. That's nice.
It is. It's very, very nice. It has all kinds of like add-ons that you can do. The configuration for Next used to be a little bit different where you had to have like different kinds of add-ons. But now I think that they've made the developer experience like so much better where it's basically just all in one.
Great. Okay. So this is our our Storybook app.
Yes.
And looking down here, we've got, it's already installed. It's running. So it ran npm run Storybook for us. And let's see, didn't build the preview, but then I think it got past that and is fine. Broken build, fix the error above. You may need to refresh the browser.
Oh no.
We'll send through crash reports. That's fine. Let's, so wait, this is down then? Okay, so let's try one more time.
Okay.
npm run Storybook.
npx sb init. But I think that should be fine. I think it should be fine.
Let's see, is it broken again? It's broken again. What doesn't it like? It doesn't like, cannot find the module AG. What the heck is this? Oh, Storybook. Which thing is broken? And this is like a brand new package, right? So nothing that we've done is what is broken. So something went weird.
Awry.
Let me see if I can find, let me do a quick Google on this error and see if maybe somebody's already noticed this and knows how to fix it.
Yeah. I just did the most recent version as well. And I didn't need, it was able to find that we were using Next.js. So I don't think it's a problem of our Next build being broken or anything.
These are older errors. Everybody's getting this issue. Now, this isn't Storybook. This is a different project. But it looks like maybe we need to... Maybe it did something weird. Okay, let's try one more time and see if maybe that does it. And it crashed again. Oh no, this is not great. Let me just try the nuclear approach where we delete the node modules and try again. Remove node modules, remove the package lock. What else is in here? Does the Storybook? That's all fine. And let's see if it works this time.
Fingers crossed.
Web Dev Challenge episode 7 is coming. Mark your calendars. Comes out on October 30th. Let's see here. What's up, everybody? Thanks for hanging out. There's our build. Oh no. Cannot. Okay. So this is not ideal.
I'm trying
Could
to
try
think of like what could
installing
be different.
AGV as a dep. Let's see. So let's npm install AJV and see if maybe just installing it manually works. Huh. Yeah, they're just
Okay.
missing. Weird. Okay, so Storybook's missing a dep right now. That's fine. We can fix that. So I'm coming down here. We've got our site running.
Perfect. The lovely
Okay.
onboarding that will run quite a few times.
And thank
And
you, Antonio, for the idea there. That was that unblocked us.
thank you. Love it.
Okay.
So now you should be able to see, click on the buttons and everything around there. This interface is basically what we're going to be using to test different permutations of our components that we develop.
Excellent. Okay, so I guess for folks who haven't seen Storybook before, do you want to give like the one sentence pitch for what this is and what it's doing?
Documentation, testing, and visualization of components all in one place without having to build your own testing playground or own testing website.
Got it. So I can see here we've got like, here's our button. We have docs for it.
Yes.
We have the primary version that we were looking at. We have the secondary version, large and small. So you can kind of see each of these is the button component. And then I'm assuming these are all being handled through probably somewhere in here is a way to get the code.
Yeah, so these are actually created by Storybook Stories, and we're gonna build some of those. But what allows you to change, like the permutations, for instance, is at the bottom where it says name and control. Those are different props that are actually available for the button. So if you set primary to false, it's going to become a regular button. Or if maybe you update the text on the button itself to be test something crazy, I don't know, hello world, it's going to change immediately as soon as you change it.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
And then we can, yeah, so we have a lot of control here.
Yes.
Great.
Absolutely. Perfect. So now that that's up and running, what we need to do is actually configure Storybook and tell it exactly where our styles are. So we can head back over to the code editor and we can open inside of the .storybook folder, it's going to be preview.ts. And what we're going to do is import the global styles. So it's going to be import, and the global styles are inside of our source folder, which is back up one level, and it's going to be app/globals.css.
Do we have that?
We should. It would be in
globals.scss. Okay, so it just wasn't globals.css.
Yes.
Got it.
Perfect. And then now in theory, we should have just about everything that we need all set up and all configured. So what we're going to do is create a very basic, very rough component just to make sure that everything is all good before we get too much farther in. So the basic structure of our components folder is going to be our source. And then what we're going to do is add a folder called components.
Okay.
And then inside of it, we are going to add another folder for all of our different components that we do. So the first one is going to be a heading.
Okay.
And then each folder for the components is going to have two pieces. One is going to be the component.tsx. So in this instance, it's going to be heading.tsx.
TSX.
Yep. And then the other one is going to be heading.stories.ts.
TS. Okay.
Yes. Perfect. So let's start with building a very, very simple heading component, and we're going to head into heading.tsx. Yep, and you're already on the right path. We're just going to import React and then create a function component called heading.
And does it matter in Storybook if it is a named or default export? Like if I do export const heading and, you know, like something like this.
Yeah, I think it should still be fine. I use default exports, but I don't think it really matters in this case.
Okay. I'm curious to see. I've never tried this, so I actually don't know what Storybook does with named exports. And
I want to say I've seen it both ways.
Okay.
So that's a great start, but we're also going to, right next to our H1, we're going to add the class name attribute. And, do you have extensions available on this IDE? Because the Tailwind IntelliSense would be very handy.
Tailwind,
I think
this
it's the
one?
first one. Yes.
Apparently I
Perfect.
already have this installed.
You don't
Who
like it, but
knows
you
what's
already have
going
the
on in this
tools.
IDE?
So for class name, you should be able to start typing text dash, and it should give you some options. Yes. Okay, perfect. So we're going to do text dash purple, which is my favorite color.
All right. And
Yep.
what shade you want?
Let's do 500, a nice middle of the ground color. Perfect.
Okay.
So this tells us that Tailwind is installed properly because the IntelliSense is popping up and letting us know that we can add Tailwind classes to this. And next, what we're going to do is head over to our heading.stories.ts.
Okay.
And this part can get a little bit repetitive. So I have a template. Is it okay if I just paste it
Yeah,
in?
please do.
Perfect.
This is such a nice thing since I started using Tuple, because before you would have had to like copy paste that into a gist and then send me the link, and then I'd have to open that somewhere. So it just sounds so
It's
nice.
so handy. The basic rundown of a storybook story is the first thing we need to do is update our imports to make sure that they are the actual components that we would like. So in this case, we don't have any props for our heading just yet, so we can leave that. We have two parts of this. We have the meta, which is going to tell us everything about our component and let us define the arguments that we saw in Storybook's UI, where we can change the different prop permutations. And then we have the actual story itself. And in this case, we really don't have a lot going on here because we're really just using it as a playground. So for the meta, we're going to use type of heading because we're telling it that we want the meta to describe our heading component.
Okay.
And it's going to be the same on line 14 inside of the story object as well.
Okay.
Perfect. So now when we save this, if we head back to Storybook, we should see that we have a new example for our heading, and we do, and we have our component there as well. So what we've done so far is basically created a super, super basic example of a component. We applied our Tailwind class, and we have made it so that we can see that component inside of Storybook.
Excellent. And so and what I like about this too is that from the standpoint of like building, I haven't had to change anything, because sometimes there are tools that I've used where they're like, oh, we'll add all this functionality. All you have to do is change the way you write your components.
Yeah.
And so the idea that, there's some boilerplate here, but it's not heavy.
Right.
And I like that. It's kind of nice that we don't have to deal with I would say the chaos of all this. We are instead able to just we mark up a component however we want, and then we have control over how much work we put into Storybook. Yeah, that's nice. I like that.
Exactly. I will say sometimes Storybook does get a little bit verbose. It tries very hard to figure out what you want the controls to be, but sometimes it does not necessarily figure it out correctly. Or maybe there are different ways that you would prefer to have those props displayed for users for documentation purposes. Perfect. So
Absolutely.
the next thing that we're going to do, and I will shorten this just in case we end up not having enough time, but I basically would like to run through creating some atomic components. And by atomic components, I mean these are the most basic building blocks of a component library or of a design system that you could think about. So some of these are going to be our heading, which we've already worked on a little bit, a simple text component, a button, which is one of the most used components on any website, an input form element, a badge, and an avatar if we get to those. And then from those components, we're going to create two different composed components, I'll call them. And these could be thought of as like different pages or maybe even just like different elements that you might find on a site.
Excellent. Okay. So I tried to keep up with you and I definitely didn't.
No, it's okay.
So you said
We have
a heading, text, input, and then what were the others?
We have heading, text, input, button.
Okay.
You're quick because I would still be on like text.
Okay. Text, input, heading, button, and then you said
Badge.
Badge.
Yes.
Okay.
And the
one
last
more.
one right now is avatar.
Okay. There's probably even faster ways to do this. The Vim users right now are like, how are you so slow?
Because I use a keyboard for everything. That's why I'm so slow. Actually, I just recently got a Stream Deck and I'm trying to figure out nifty ways to create like shortcuts to, I can never remember like keyboard shortcuts. So yeah.
Yeah, I am getting slowly better, but it has taken years. Okay, so I have my heading here.
Yes.
And why don't I just take each of these and we'll do a very, very basic kind of, we'll mark it up. We'll just say to do avatar. And we'll change this name to avatar.
Sounds good.
Okay, then we can save that. We can head over here. We can do the same thing. Change this to badge. Button. Input. And text. Okay.
Perfect.
And then do you want me to do the story thing too, like copy?
Either you can copy it or I can paste the boilerplate. Either one, whatever is going to be the easiest.
Let's see, if I change each of these to be like its main thing, and I do one of those, I think it goes pretty fast. So why don't we?
I would have done that in like 50 seconds, maybe even more. A simple find and replace.
Okay, then we go here, text, and then we do, was that it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right, so then wait, did I get the badge? No, not yet. Okay, so if I did that right, something went wrong. View error, unable to index files.
Refreshing.
One of these, one of these, one of those, one of them, and one of these. So that should be all of them.
You might have to stop the server and start it again. I noticed even in development, sometimes when you're adding stories or the component.stories. whatever, it takes a second to.
Avatar stories. Missing default export from, so I screwed up something in avatar. Oh, because we didn't do the avatar because it was off my screen.
It was hiding.
Okay. Hey, how about now? Hey, look at that. Okay, so now we have all of our very simple pieces. They all are showing. Shouldn't these be showing? Did I screw this up?
No. Oh, they should be showing fair. Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Little refresh. Always does it.
There's our heading, here's our input, and there's our text. Okay.
Perfect.
Components.
We love it. That's half the battle, honestly. Just doing everything other way. Perfect. So the way I know everybody tends to do component development a little bit differently. I tend to start with the props and then work my way down from there. I do already have the props up and running just in case we do need like a backup copy and paste also. So if it gets to be too much or maybe it would just be easier to copy and paste, always happy to do so.
Okay.
So In thinking about ways that I would, because a heading is always my first thing that I go to whenever I'm starting a new project, because we always need a heading for a landing page. If it's a blog, if it's a directory, you always need some version of a heading. So typically that's the first one that I try to do. And in thinking about how am I going to use it, how can I componentize it to make sure that it's actually going to like fit my uses, the first thing I think about is semantics. I don't want to have an like H1 and H2 and H3. I don't want to have all those as different components. So the first prop that I would think about is adding a level. And what we can do, either you can do it that way, or we can also have a type export as well, whichever one is the most comfortable.
And it looks like the storybook convention is to do something like that.
Yes.
Okay, so we'd have a level.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to have a level, and it's just going to be our H1, the pipe, H2, H3, all the way through H6. And this is just going to tell us that we can, keep up with semantics and that we can have all of those proper heading levels.
Got it. Whoa, what button was that?
Ooh.
It's because the 6 is over here. Okay. All right, so there's that. Let me make this a little bigger so we can see what we're doing.
Yeah. And then the next thing that I usually think about is distinguishing size from level. So just because we have an H1, it doesn't mean that we necessarily want that to always be the biggest thing on the page. So in thinking about size and in thinking about the fact that we're using Tailwind, I try to use Tailwind naming conventions for size. And because you're not as familiar, is it okay if I paste them in while I talk about it?
Please do.
Okay, perfect. So Tailwind typically uses the 2-letter like SM, LG, except when you get to the larger sizes. Now, I will say, I wish that they used medium instead of base. I get it both ways, but it would be handy. But basically what we're also saying is we have a specific level, but regardless of what level is, we want it to be whatever size the developer states. The next thing that I usually think about is alignment, which is typical for any version of text. So the next prop that we can have is align or alignment, and we're just going to go with left, center, and right.
Ooh. Got it.
Perfect. And then the last one that we need is going to be children. And this is going to be a React node. And what this is going to do is say anything that's included inside of our heading is what we want to display. Now, we mostly want this to be a string. But yeah, we're just going to go ahead and pass that right along.
Do I need to be prefixed? Oh, it's React's in the global namespace, so that'll work. And then what do I do? Props, heading props.
Yep. Or we can define them individually as well. I can
Like
copy and paste
destructure it.
Yeah, because we also want to define a couple of defaults.
Gotcha. Let's do defaults.
So for level, we want somebody to specify exactly what level it is, so we're not going to give it a default. But for size, we're going to make the base size the default in case they don't pass anything in.
There we go.
And then for alignment, we're going to default to left alignment.
Okay.
Perfect. So now what we need to do, now that we have our props and everything, is we need to create a heading tag that's based on the level that is provided. And we can do that by creating a const, and we're just going to call it heading tag. And we're going to set it to be whatever level, H1, H whatever it is. And then the next thing we can do is actually replace our H1 to be that heading tag. Yep. So that way it's dynamic based on whatever was input.
Perfect.
And we also need to go back up to the top for just 1 second to import class names, because now
Let's
we're
see if
going
my thingy's going to work here. If I start typing class names, it should, theoretically speaking,
Fingers crossed.
Come on. No, not that one. This one. You. Class names from class names. Ha-ha!
Perfect.
Okay.
We love it. So we're going to set this as heading class names, like as a const. And that's usually my naming convention, whatever I am styling class names. And then we're going to first define any common class names that we need. And we actually don't need to put them in an array. We can actually just use a string and then like it'll concat them all together. So all of our headings we want to be bold. So Tailwind's naming convention for fonts and font styling, it does get a little bit confusing because sometimes it's font and sometimes it's text. But to make the font bold, we're just going to do font-bold.
Okay.
And then the next thing that we want to do outside of that string, so we can add a comma at the end, is we want to start conditionally assigning the sizing based on whatever size the person has input is. So we're going to actually use the brackets.
Square boys, curly boys.
Oh, the curly boys, yes. And what this allows us to do is, for instance, determine the sizing. So let's start a string as the key, and we're going to say that we want to apply text-4XL, which is the Tailwind sizing of 4x. I don't really know what that is in the actual pixels or M sizing, but then we're going to do a colon to give it a value. And we're going to say if size is equal to 4XL.
Nice. Okay.
Then we're basically just applying those styles. So we can do that for the remainder of them. And I have them all queued up if you want me to copy and paste.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
And now I'm not familiar with class names, but could we also do like string interpolation where we kind of did like a text size?
Yes, you could do it with class names, but the problem in this case is actually going to be Tailwind. So these classes are generated at build time, and string interpolation doesn't happen at the same time. So what happens is the class name is built, but Tailwind did not generate the class. So
because it didn't see this or whatever?
Yeah.
Got it.
Which that was a big hurdle to get over, because this in theory could be so much cleaner by just saying the size and then just, like use string interpolation to throw in what the actual size is. Mm-hmm. But I will say that is one slight drawback to doing it in this method. But the last thing that we want to do after we have conditionally rendered our size and class names is render our text alignment. So using the same method, it's going to be text-left for our key inside of the curly brackets because we're using a new conditional.
Got it. So text left.
Yep. And then it's going to be if our alignment is left. Exactly.
Okay. And then we need a few of those.
Mm-hmm.
So we can just change them center. If I can spell it right. Center.
Spelling is hard.
It's the worst. Okay, so that's left, center, right. What else do we have?
Absolutely. And then
just our children, right?
Yes. Yep. And then we can throw children right in the center.
Okay. And then do I just apply this as a variable here, or do I have to do anything with it to use the class names?
Nope. You just have to apply it directly onto the element.
All right. So what are you mad about? Oh, yeah, that makes sense. So that's our component. So we've got our class names here. I will collapse these down so that we can see what's going on in a full file. All right, this makes sense. And I can see kind of where this is going, where you want to intentionally choose what people are doing rather than saying you can use any CSS you want. So you're sort of limiting the scope a little bit.
Exactly.
And so you could even say, like, maybe our headings, we don't have these ones. We only get 4 options. And so you as the designer can kind of say, this is what we allow in our style guide. And if you want something different, you need to make a case for why you're not going to use our style guide.
100%. And also you can override these sizes as well, which we'll get into the Tailwind config eventually, but maybe somewhere down the line, I hire a designer because I'm not a great designer and they say, hey, your sizing is way too small and you can't read it. But maybe I don't want to go change all of the sizing within like my components and my app and everything like that. I can actually use the Tailwind config to just change them all in one place, and that's it. And it's done.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So let's actually see what this looks like in action. And we're going to open our stories that are available for this heading component.
Okay, so we're going to go out here. I'm going to make this a little bigger. Heading. Here's our playground.
Oh, in the code. I'm sorry.
Oh, in the code. Sorry.
Yes.
Stories here. Oh, and now we don't have our type. So I need my heading props now.
Mm-hmm.
And then do I replace this type of heading with the heading props?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else we need to fix here?
In our archetypes, what we're going to do is make a few amendments. So the archetypes on line 8 is what tells us what controls we can have inside of the UI. And because this gets a little bit monotonous, I can go ahead and copy this in for you.
Yeah, please
But
do.
the basic setup for this is we are telling the archetypes exactly what child we want to update, or like what prop we want to update. Ooh, did I mess that up really bad?
No. I think we might have a double A here, but that's all right. We can fix that fast. Okay.
Perfect. So, excuse my comments. I just have to write it out because if I don't, I'll forget.
Not a problem.
So what we want to do is make sure that our children is actually updated to text so that we can see what we're typing in. We can't actually input a React node inside of Storybook. It's not really going to know like what to do with that. So if we want to actually see the changes happen as we're in Storybook, we're just going to change it to text. And then for level, size, and alignment, what we're doing is changing the type to be select. I want to say it would probably end up being a like a text box if we didn't have the select there, but that just gives us a nice graphical UI drop down, so we can easily just say, okay, I want this, whatever, super easy to select. And then at the bottom, what we're going to do is for our args, because args and archetypes are different, is we're going to define what we want our default props in this component to be. So for instance, let's say that we want to start this story at a level of H1. That isn't going to change anything visually. It's just going to be semantic inside of the DOM. So is it okay if I type it out?
Please.
Oh, apparently I just like getting rid of brackets. So we're going to set the level to be an H1. And I love that the IntelliSense tells me exactly what sizes and what levels are available.
Extremely nice.
It is super nice. For children, it's just a string, so we can say whatever we want it to within reason. And then we'll have it be left aligned. No?
It's very temperamental. If you don't take its first suggestion, it's like, okay, fine, I'm not helping.
Exactly. So once we save that, we actually should be able to head over to the Storybook UI now and see our changes. So like I said, level is not going to really do too much in the UI itself. But if we were to do something like open the console, we should be able to see that those changes are made. And I love that we can see the changes in the size as well. And then if we were to change text or do anything like that, we should be able to see that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. Like, this is exactly what I want. It's sort of a sandbox where I can see what the component is doing by itself. And what we've made here is effectively a self-contained component. And this, from a like architecture standpoint, from a design standpoint, you know, I remember the first time that I saw one of these, I was like, this is a lot of boilerplate when I could just put some CSS in.
Yeah.
And then I realized that if I'm working with a team of even 5 people, the likelihood that those 5 people will all write CSS the same way is approaching 0. And when you get into large teams, like I joined IBM and there were 32 teams, like 150 plus engineers working in this company, 0 chance that they were going to consistently apply arbitrary things. It had to be very prescriptive. And so we had a whole design team or design systems team that was building out these types of prescriptive things. And when you looked at their components, you were like, this feels like a lot. And they were like, trust me, if it wasn't there, y'all would make a huge mess.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That is the one, I'm telling you, the one thing I learned about like working on a design system. None of our components were small. None of them were just like, oh, super tiny, super cute, little easy components. They were always so verbose. And in fact, it took me a really long time to really understand a lot of the components just because there was so much going on behind the scenes that we had tried to account for to make the developer experience and the developer's life a lot easier so that they didn't have to apply extra styles, so they didn't have to take certain things into account. So it was always semantic, so that it's always accessible, which is accessibility is a big thing. And that's something that not everybody takes into account or that everybody knows how to do. So if we could do it in our design system, then we did do it.
Yeah, and I think that really does kind of, it starts to highlight the value of a design systems team is that, you know, if what I want to do as an engineer is I want to get the ticket that I've been assigned for the project my team's working on, and I want to build it as quickly as possible.
Yes.
And my incentive is not to do extensive accessibility testing. It's not to do extensive like design system adherence testing and to make sure that everything I do looks exactly like everything everybody else does across the entire company. It's just not, you know, and we've all used websites where they don't have design systems, and you can feel the outcome of that, where each page of your dashboard is just a little different and it feels a little weird. And so, you know, it's very much that like the design system is there to do the work that we will, if we were left on our own, we would cut those corners. And so, you know, it's the layer, it's the foundation of making something that feels good to use, even if I'm the laziest version of myself when I use those components. And I think when it's done well, where the magic really comes in is that you end up with components that are easier for me to use as a developer who wants to work fast, and all of the right outcomes. It's accessible, it's cohesive with the rest of the design, it's maintainable, it's using, you know, the best practices from the company. And if y'all go and make the change on the design system team later and say, hey, we're gonna actually tweak these, the whole website just looks right because we're all using the right system. It is difficult to communicate this sometimes, but it's so hard to overstate the value of these foundational systems. And you know, even if it's just you.
No, what you said about being lazy, I am a lazy engineer, especially when I've worked all day and I'm trying to figure out like how to fit my side project in. Like I have this idea and I want it to come out, but I don't have the full capacity to do a design. I don't have the full capacity to make it look exactly how I want it to right now. I just have an idea and I need to get it out.
Right.
That I will be lazy about the styling, about creating the components and getting something at least looking halfway decent if I can focus on what's actually the hard part for me, which sometimes is figuring out how to integrate certain functionality. This part, we can offload some of the duty a little bit. And then especially what you said about inviting people in. If you decide to go open source or you decide to just have people from like different backgrounds to work on this project, it's going to be so much easier to be like, hey, build this page. I already have the components designed for you. If you find something that you need that's not there, let's add a prop or let's update the design system or the component library part of the app.
Absolutely. Yeah. Excellent. This is great. So, okay, what do we want to do next? What's our next step here?
Perfect. Well, I'm looking at the time just to make sure that I am on time, and text is sort of the same as heading. So I'm going to go ahead and skip over it for right now, and I'll come back to it. But let's go ahead and take a look at button.
Okay.
Now, buttons, I just saw somebody put in the chat, see, Valve uses a lot of buttons. Buttons are one of those things where you just have 18 different types of buttons, and somehow they all look very slightly different, but it's different enough for you to tell that something's different.
Right.
So let's say in this design system or in this project that we're working on, we want to have three main buttons, which is typical. We want to have different variants, which is what we're going to call this prop, and we're going to call them primary, secondary, and empty. And empty is basically a button that kind of looks like a link and it doesn't have any border or anything like that.
Got it.
We also want to have a couple of different sizes. So we'll make it easy and we'll say we want to have a size variant or a small variant, excuse me, and we'll do base. And for small, we actually just want it to be SM because
Oh, you're right.
sorry, I should have said that. And then we want to also have children for the same purpose that we had our children in our heading. And that's going to also be a React node. We're also going to have an on-click function that is going to be optional just in case you want to have, I guess, a button that looks nice and it can return void. Yeah. And then we're going to have disabled as an optional prop as well. So both on-click and disabled are allowed to be optional.
Got it. And we make things optional in TypeScript like this.
We do. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So then down here, we're going to have our button props. And is this valid TypeScript? I just realized I was writing a default function.
I do believe it is. I have mine as void. So either way, we're not adding an on-click to our actual button today, but in theory, if you wanted to do it that way, you could.
So we'll get our variant. Do we want to default that to something?
Yeah, let's default it to primary.
Okay, and then our size, I'm assuming we default to base.
Yes.
Our children won't be defaulted. The on-click will default to that function. And disabled, we would default to false, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So then, am I making this into...
Is giving you a terrible time, it looks like.
How dare you? Void is not assignable to type.
Oh.
Never.
Let's try it. Yeah. Do an anonymous function. Yeah.
What button am I trying to put? That button. Okay.
Perfect.
So then we got a button. We have our on-click, and that equals on-click. Then we have our children.
And we have disabled as well. That needs to be a prop.
Oh, right. And disabled is going to be disabled. Okay.
Perfect.
And then we got to do our class names, right?
We do. Awesome. So what we can do is start with just general classes that are going to be on the button. And I like rounded buttons, not the absolute square ones. So the first one that we're going to have as soon as we do class names is going to be rounded. And this changes the border radius for any elements.
Okay.
Perfect. And then we're going to open some curly brackets. And first, we're going to start by defining the different style variations. So before we actually head into the style variations, I'm going to have you open the tailwind.config.ts file.
Okay.
Perfect. So this is almost like a one-stop shop, a one-stop place where you can both extend and override any values inside of TypeScript. So what we're going to do in this case is extend our colors. So right under foreground, we're going to add a new line and we're going to add a primary color. So we're just going to call it primary. And then we're actually going to use a hex value. You also can use CSS variables as well, but it's going to be B388EB as in Bree.
B388EB?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's just a lovely lavender color.
And do we want a secondary as well while we're here?
No, because our secondary button is actually going to be a button that uses the primary color, but with an outline and white on the inside.
Oh, I understand. Okay.
So we can head back over to our button.tsx. And for primary, the first thing that we want to do is set the background to be our primary color. So we're going to use bg-primary inside of a string.
Sorry, you're gonna have to walk me through this because I haven't used class names. So
yeah, sorry.
These are the class names we want to apply if variant equals primary, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So what we're doing here is this is going to be bg-primary.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And then after that, we can string a lot of them together for all of the styles that we need. So inside of that string, we're going to continue and say that we want the text to be white. So that's just going to be text-white.
Okay.
And then that is going to complete our primary button. So it's basically going to be a button that has rounded edges, has a purple background, and has white text. That's it. Really simple. So our next variant is going to be if it's secondary. And then the styles that we want to apply are BG-white because we want the background of the button to be white. We want the text to appear in the purple color. So that's going to be text-primary. And then we also want to apply a border to this one. So the border is going to be a few different styles that we need. The first one is going to be border by itself, no hyphens. The next one is going to be border -2. And this gives us a border with, I want to say, a 2-pixel width. And then the next one is going to be border -primary. And this is going to set the border color to be that lavender color.
Got it.
And that completes our secondary variation. And then we can move down to one more, which is going to be the empty button. Yes. Okay. And what we're going to do is basically just have this look almost like a link. So we really only care about the text and its color. So it can be text-primary. And then what we want to do is underline it as well. So that's going to be space underline.
Space underline?
Oh, no, just the word underline.
Just
I'm
the
sorry.
word underline.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay.
So that is the different variations for the buttons that we have. So now we can define a little bit of padding and sizing for the buttons as well. So we can come out of that little curly brace section and add another one. This is going to be a really, really small one. But if our size is equal to base.
Oops, base.
Yeah, then what we want to do is apply a padding of 4. So P-4.
P4.
And then the second one for our small is going to be P2.
P2 for small. And those were our only sizes, right?
Yes. We only had 2 of them there.
What are you mad about, bro?
Small.
Oh, because I keep doing it. Yeah, all right.
I didn't catch you either.
Okay. So then if I add these class names, we should be in good shape.
Yes.
Button class names. Okay, so.
Perfect.
Now I need to go into the stories.
Yes.
And then we'll get the type of button props.
And just like last time, I can copy those arcs and arc types in for you.
Yes, go ahead. All right. And then for these ones, is there anything worth calling out here?
Nope. I think it's basically the same as before. Only the difference is that for 6, it says we have a disabled Boolean. And that we'll get to that in a really quick second. I have some styles that I can paste in for that. But this should be enough for us to see what the buttons look like inside of Storybook. So if we save this and head over to the browser, we should be able to see our buttons.
And then we can do secondary, we can do empty.
And change the sizing.
Yeah, this is looking good.
Perfect. So I do have a couple more styles, but it's a little bit tricky to say them. So I will copy them and paste them in so that you can see them.
Okay.
And can we open button.tsx?
Apparently not.
Perfect. So I'm going to scroll down just a little bit right above our class names, and I'm going to add these almost at the top. The thing that I really like about doing it this way, you can see that this easily gets to be a lot of class names when you think about all of the different button states there are. And even if we had just like one button where we weren't using class names or we were putting them directly onto the button itself, between ternaries and different states and what's being used, it can get really clunky really quickly. So even though it looks to be a little bit more verbose, I really prefer doing it this way because I'm being explicit about what I'm doing and like what is actually contained inside of the classes.
Yeah, this is directly addressing one of my like key like one of the key problems I see with Tailwind
Mhm.
is that as you add more layers, the
Yes.
layers that you're adding, you're not always clear on like which ones are which. So it's just sort
Mhm.
of this like wall of classes, and
Yeah.
it's not clear why they're all there. So breaking them out like this is helpful because you can now see like, this everything in here is related to the thing being disabled. Everything here is related to hover states, and I can confidently like know that I'm not breaking a different layer of the styling if I start messing with these class names.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes there's a weird feeling about like separation of concerns, especially when you get into things like CSS and JS, which
Mm-hmm.
I know that's also controversial, but I actually really like CSS and JS too. I think I like all kinds of styling,
You're
different
you're just
options for different
specifically
situations.
out here to get me riled up is what I'm hearing.
No, I know that one is a really hot take. I know a lot of people do not like CSS and JS. But yeah,
And
so
okay, so this one, let me try to do a little bit of inference here.
yeah, go ahead.
My hunch is that the hover classes we just want to put in because Tailwind knows how hover works.
Mhm.
And so that's not something that we have to do. But this one, my hunch is we have to enable only if the disabled is set to true. Or does this like Tailwind knows when disabled is there and we'll do it?
Exactly. Tailwind already knows when it
Okay.
is there, and it's looking at the DOM to see if it is disabled. So we can actually just add both of these classes as they are to the class names, and they'll just work.
Okay. So then these come in here.
Mhm.
And let's go up here, go to primary. And so we should get, there's some hover.
Mhm.
And then if I make it disabled, it goes disabled.
Yes.
Okay.
And one thing
All
I do
right.
want to call out, which is something that I actually learned very recently, is that enabled keyword that is on the hover classes back in button.tsx. So I was having a little bit of trouble with the button doing the hover effects when it was disabled. And what this enabled prefix does is it makes sure that it only applies these styles if there is no disabled element or disabled attribute on the element itself.
Got it. So it's sort of like if you were in CSS, if you were using like not disabled and then applying styles.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yes. Yeah. Perfect. So how are we feeling about that? Again, a little bit more verbose, but I think
I,
it does the job.
it does the job. And again, I think it's nice that these are like classified together. So we know what the things are. And then when you look down here, you can see, what we've done. And you could even take that a step further if you wanted and say like, these would be called, I don't know, the variant styles, and these could be called size styles so that you really have like a clear delineation of what's going on.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's probably limits of reasonableness in these. You can always over abstract something, and then it's even harder to maintain because you're
Yeah.
like, oh, why is everything in 15 different places? But
Yeah.
there is a happy medium to be struck here, and I feel like these types of decisions are the right call in my opinion, because you don't have to like figure out that this and this concatenated into one string, and you have to kind of recognize where we switched context. So that's really nice.
Absolutely. And I really like what you said about over abstraction. When I first learned how to use TypeScript, everything was a type, everything had its own everything, which is too much. Not
Mm-hmm.
everything needs to be separate, not everything needs to have its own type. Even in thinking about like button variations, I probably would have made the variants their own types so that I could export them because I was convinced that I was going to use them somewhere else. Now, that is a pattern that I got from working on a larger scale system. And it's something that I absolutely do not need in a personal blog or a personal project like this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the one of the things that I've learned from TypeScript is if I find myself writing a type and I'm not working on a library, I've probably overcomplicated my code, because the
Mm,
vast majority of TypeScript that I write, if I write the code in a simplified way, TypeScript can infer all of my types, and then
mhm.
I don't have to write custom types.
Yeah.
And so that has been a big. It's encouraged me to not be clever in my code and to keep things simple so that the parsers can infer, and I don't have to tell TypeScript what to do. And I never have to write types. Like some of the things that people post on Twitter, like, how do you even do this with types? And I'm like, I would never.
Yeah, I think doing the jump from JavaScript to TypeScript I actually started with Java. So everything was super strongly typed, everything had a type. So going to JavaScript, I was like, wait, what do you mean there's nothing? But it forces you to really understand what JavaScript is doing and keeping track of how you're handling your data. And TypeScript kind of abstracts that a little bit for you. So it's easy to get into the mode of, I just want to add safety around it.
Sure, yeah. Okay, so we have about, call it 15-ish minutes of coding time left. Did you want to, we can probably get at maybe one more of these?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do, what would you like to do, avatar, or would you like to do badge? Both of these are not too crazy.
My hunch is that badge isn't going to be terribly different from the button. In terms of like, it's going to be a box with padding and borders. So let's do an image. I think that'll be interesting.
Okay. Or we can do the input. The input is interesting too. Either one.
Whichever. Chat, you got an opinion? You have 10 seconds to decide.
We have input, we've got badge, and we got avatar, which is an image.
We got one vote for avatar.
Okay. There we go. We'll go with that one.
We're going with that one. I want images. Let's do it.
Perfect. Awesome. So we're going to open avatar.tsx. Perfect. And our avatar prompts are actually going to be pretty simple. The first thing that we need is a source to tell us where the image is coming from. And it's going to be a string. Yep. And then we have an alt image, or not alt image, excuse me, an alt tag that we're going to apply to the image as well. And then we're going to give this a small base or a large size.
Okay.
And it's going to be SM.
Small. You like cannot not do that.
And large is going to be LG. Yep.
Okay.
And those are actually all of the props that we need because for avatar specifically, because it's an image, most of the classes are shared. So we can destructure if we would like. We don't have any defaults in this one because we always want them to tell us what the source is. We want them to tell us what it is. But I guess we can provide a default size.
Yeah, we can maybe default the size. Okay, so
Perfect.
There we go.
Our return for this one is going to be an image. And we are going to directly add that alt right on top of it. And the source.
Got the alt and source. And then our class names are going to end up being the avatar class names that we'll define up here. Avatar class names, and that's going to be class names.
And we may eventually want to close our image tag as well.
Ah, yes, that's probably useful.
It might be. So for avatar, a lot of and I say a lot, it's 2 classes. What we want it to be is think about when you're commenting on something and it's this circle that has a picture in it, or maybe if it doesn't have your picture, it's just your initial. We're just going with the picture version for right now. But in order to get that rounded circle image, what we're going to do is do rounded full. And this gives it a border radius of, I think, like
50% or something.
9,000 pixels. It doesn't do percentages. It actually does.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Full pixel amount. And then we also want to add object cover, which is going to add the object fit property on it as well. And then we're going to open some curly brackets and we're going to work on defining the sizing of our images. So sizing is one of those things, like I said, that I definitely could see myself defining and then coming back to and being like, ooh, that was not a good idea. It needs to be bigger or it needs to be smaller. So what we're going to do, because our image is going to be fully round, we need to set a width and a height on each one. So if the size is large, then we're going to set it at width of 24. And that's going to be W/W-24.
24. And then is it like H24 as well?
Yes.
Got it. Are they moving, is Tailwind planning on adopting the like inline and block syntax as well? Like
the logical.
Yeah, because now when you do like text directions and stuff, like if you go left to right or top to bottom, if you're using inline and block, it adjusts properly so that it still flows if you like switch to Japanese or something.
Ooh.
whereas the
True.
width and height doesn't. So yeah, that'll be a fun thing. It's already
Oh,
implemented,
perfect.
says
Somebody
Maple
said it's already
Leaf.
implemented. Love it. I will have to go check that out.
Very cool. Okay, so that's something to play with.
Perfect.
So we've got our large, we've got our small, we've got our base.
Yes.
All right, and what sizes do you want for the base?
For base, we can do 20.
20. And for small, 16?
Yes. How'd you
Okay.
know? And it's funny because one of the trickiest things is not every number is a size in Tailwind. So sometimes I was using like 18, 19. Those aren't sizes.
Oh, so it's like a base 4? Oh no, base,
For the
yeah.
smaller numbers, you might have one for every single number. And then as it gets larger, the increments get bigger.
Mm.
So it wasn't intuitive at first, but if the IntelliSense really helps out there. Yeah, and then we just have the avatar classes, and that is actually our entire avatar component. And that is something that I used to do a lot, and I used to repeat and code multiple places. So even something as simple as this makes it a lot easier. So we can
Cool.
actually
So
go
let's
over
get-
to our stories
Yep.
for avatar, and I will throw in some args and arg types.
Avatar props. We'll drop
Oh, I think
these
we
in.
forgot to export it. The avatar props.
Oh, oops. Let's go to our avatar again. Oh, yep, sure did. Okay, so we've got our avatar props,
Perfect.
and then you had, yeah, I'll let you take over.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're doing the select. You've got some defaults in there, which is great.
Yeah. And
Perfect.
for the archetypes, it's actually nice that we didn't have to do many changes here because Storybook correctly inferred exactly what I needed.
Perfect. Okay, so now we go back out. Here's our avatar, and we have a little kitten.
Perfect.
And we can start messing with it, and then I think,
You can put
do I
whatever you want in there.
have, I think I have my headshot in here, so we can like, yeah, so you can swap out for
Perfect.
one of those, make it a different size.
Exactly.
So this is really fun. Like I love that you can do that. Now, one thing that I noticed that am I completely derailing you if I ask a
No.
couple Storybook questions? Okay, so something cool that I saw when we were looking at the button, for example, is that I started kind of switching stuff up, and I was going to say like, let's do a small secondary button, and the text is going to be secondary small, and then it gives me this new button down here. If I click this, does it just generate the file so that we get another option in the bottom left here?
Let's see. I actually don't know.
We're going to call this secondary small. Wow.
Oh, okay. I see it there, but did it actually add it to our? Okay.
How does that work?
Is it in the stories folder? They created a separate stories folder when we installed it.
Button stories, example button, primary, secondary. Now that's their examples.
Okay. And they
Where
didn't
would
add
this have
any.
gone? Where did you go?
Can you humor me for one moment? If you stop the server and start it again, did it persist?
What an excellent question. I was just about to start hunting for that file name somewhere. Let's see. I'll come back here.
It did.
It says it's there. So where did you go? Cool. Okay, so I'm both impressed and confused. You didn't go in here, primary, secondary. So theoretically, it would have exported from here, is what I would have guessed. All right, let's find in files, and we're gonna look for secondary small.
Nothing.
How on earth do you exist?
Let me.
Does any Tailwind experts know?
Let's see. There is a blog post. Is there anything that I can? Oh, well, that's misleading.
Local storage index DB. That's a good question. Maybe it's in here.
Oh,
Let's see. That's not it. Local storage, storybook, manager store. That doesn't look like it. Index DB, nothing I see in there. Oh, here it is. Last viewed story ID. So that's button secondary small. Let's see if this got stored anyway. Ref ID, storybook internal. Okay, so it's not generating files.
Okay,
Is
that
it
would be
giving
really
us anything
handy.
in here that's like, hey, we created a thing that you should probably save?
You can probably try saving another one versus having to scroll back up through all the mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's create a third one. We'll go empty. And let's create a new one. Add a new story to your existing stories file. So it says it's doing something.
But it's not actually adding it.
Where do you live? Button props empty. I am.
Or is it in the stories this time? No?
I don't know.
Nothing still at the bottom for... Okay, yeah, I'm actually a little bit confused on that then, because there are two technically button stories because they have their own, but I don't think, if it's accurately picking up all of the rest of our props and everything like that, I don't know.
It's all working. So
Yeah.
something is happening. And oh, you know what? I know how to test this for real. Let's git add everything. We'll git commit and we'll say testing. And then we're going to run it again. And we're going to see if anything changes in our git setup when we do this. So let's, one more time, we'll make a button. I'm going to go to empty and we're going to make it base and we'll disable it. And then I'll add that. We'll say empty base disabled.
Yeah. And if that doesn't work, someone mentioned that we also have an unsaved file in the editor.
Failed.
Timed out.
Try refreshing. I think I did something weird there. Whatever. We'll empty base disabled. Okay, so that says it did something, and then we can go to source control. Where's the actual view? There we go. Secondary.
Oh, it did add it.
Well, this one deleted it.
Oh. From button.stories. No, it's in components too.
Fascinating what it's doing. So, yeah. How does this work? I'm so confused because it's
because now I don't think I know how it works either.
Okay.
I think I also may not know how it works now then. So
this is fascinating because it's literally showing us the stuff working, but it's not there. Amazing. Anyways,
I love it.
So Storybook, maybe you can somebody can tell us how this actually functions. But I would say, short of me not understanding Storybook, this was fascinating. Like there's a lot to learn in here. There's a lot of really useful stuff that we can take and move into our projects in the future. So we have, let's see, about 6 minutes before I got to shut us down.
Yeah.
So where should people go if they want to go deeper? Are there more resources you recommend or anything else?
The Tailwind Labs YouTube channel is something that I have found to be particularly helpful. They have like a lot of different videos on there, but I think something that's hard to get a gauge on sometimes is patterns, and patterns that work for you in your development style. This pattern tends to work for me, but I know that there are some people who this isn't what they would necessarily reach for. And I think it's okay to find what's your jam, what works for you, especially on personal projects. If it helps you to build and it helps you to build faster, then do it. Experiment with it. See how it scales. See how many problems you have, or how many things do you have to go back to and adjust and continue to be flexible. And then I always find my everything else on Twitter. So one thing I also do want to mention that we actually didn't get to take a look at because I'm bad with time. And I said, oh yeah, we'll build 8 components in an hour. Dumbest thing I've
happens
said
to the best of us.
Is Tailwind really does allow you to be flexible and customized in a lot of ways. So one thing that I had like queued up and ready was showing that we can have one login form, and with using CSS variables and just defining a couple of really quick things in our Tailwind config, we can create like multiple different themes very quickly. So again, you don't have to start one place and just say, this is exactly where I want it to be. Development is an iterative task. You're going to come across things that change. You're going to come across a lot of things that you want to like tweak or make modifications to. And building in components and componentizing your thinking really allows you to build small things at a time, adjust. And then if you come up with new ways that you want to do things, you don't have to implement all of those like straight to production immediately. It allows you to kind of build, deploy what you like, scrap what you don't.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, this is great. I feel like I'm maybe my heart is a little more open to Tailwind after today. Still don't know if I'm going to use it, but you know, I can talk about it now.
Well, you know what? Clearly you have used it before because you had the IntelliSense. So you were already like basically a Tailwind developer.
Basically a Tailwind
developer. You were ready.
Don't tell anybody who actually writes Tailwind, but
yeah, that's okay.
So this is great. Let me send one more round of links to you and your stuff here. So make sure you go and follow Bree on all the places. We have been talking about Storybook today, so we'll do a Storybook.
Yes. And if there's something that you would be interested in like seeing more of, I've been toying with the idea of like doing a YouTube series about this thinking, especially since we didn't get to go through everything. And I would love to do it in more long form if it would be interesting to people.
1000% yes. Like I don't even need to wait for the comments to confirm. Like definitely do it. Yeah, it's coming in already. Like make that happen. That's a great idea.
Perfect.
All right, so let me do one more round of shout outs to our captioner. We've had Vanessa here all day from White Coat Captioning, doing real life human captioning, and that is made possible through the support of our sponsor, Netlify. Make sure you go check out the site, click on the buttons, and let these sponsors know that you appreciate them making this show better for everybody. Also, we've been using Tuple today. You saw Bree being able to take over and copy paste. We were able to do some other little fun things, and you know, we can even do fun stuff like drawing on the screen. Like, what up? It's great. So all that is due to Tuple. Thank you, Tuple, for sponsoring the show. I really do appreciate it. It makes it possible to keep doing this every Thursday. Speaking of doing this every Thursday, going into the end of the year, it's going to get a little bit weird. I'm going to be in San Francisco next week. We're doing a live edition. Let me actually drop a link to this. We're going to do a live recording of Web Dev Challenge, at the Sanity opening party for Next.js Conf. It's going to be great. We've got Kent C. Dodds, Aaron Francis, Charlie Gerard, and Demetrius Clark are going to be the devs. I'm going to be an advisor. We're going to have one of the folks from Sanity there as an advisor. It's going to be amazing. Then the week after that, I'm at GitHub Universe. If you have not been to GitHub Universe before, it rules. You should go. Bree, are you going to be there?
No, not this year.
Bummer. Hopefully we'll be able to hang out in person somewhere soon.
Yes, absolutely.
And then I'm going to Houston, and we're doing another in-person Web Dev Challenge, this time in partnership with Intuit and the Render ATL team. More details on that to follow. But what that means for the schedule of Learn with Jason is that it's going to be a little sparse going into the end of the year. And just keep your eye on the schedule. You can find things wherever you like to subscribe to things, Discord, email, calendar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you've been enjoying this, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share it with a friend, all those good things. And Bree, thank you so much for being part of this. Any parting words before we wrap this up?
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun. And fun fact, I was actually words. You have taught me so much on like so many different platforms. I was very intimidated to like come on because I was like, what am I going to teach Jason that he doesn't already know? He's the one who is teaching me.
Well, you taught me a lot, and I am very glad that you came on. Thank you so much for being here. And chat, thank you as always for hanging out. We're going to call this one done. We will see you all next time.
Yes, thank you so much.